Welcome. I'm not going to do that all night. I'm glad you're here. Please, I welcome you. I hope that you will enjoy tonight's presentation. Have you ever wondered why music is so natural as a part of a film? Why did music become such an integral part of a soundtrack? Music in film seems so natural, so common, that maybe a better question is, what is the impact of no music in a film? Have you ever watched a movie that had no musical underscore? It's a rather strange experience. I want to watch that. It's a weird experience if you've never watched a film that's intended to have music and the music's gone. We'll experience a little bit of that tonight. There aren't very many. There are some notable examples of films that have no or virtually no music. If you like really old movies, maybe you've seen Fritz Lang's N. It's the letter N. That's the title. It's from 1931. It stars Peter Lorre. He's a serial killer. N stands for murder. And he goes around whistling Griggs in the Hall of the Mountain King everywhere he goes. So the only music you hear is him whistling everywhere he goes. And you always know where he is because you'll start hearing. And you always know something ominous is getting ready to happen. It's not too dissimilar from this. When you hear that, you know the shark's coming, right? But there's a big difference between Jaws and that movie M, the way music's being handled there. In M, we hear the music, we hear the whistling, but so does everybody in the film. They hear it as well. It's called diegetic music. The music exists in the film world itself. But in Jaws, the audience hears it, we have the warning, but the victims don't get that luxury. They don't know that that music's there. They don't hear it. That's called non-diegetic music. There's some other musicless films. You may have seen some of these. No Country for Old Men, Hitchcock's The Birds, Blair Witch Project. There's several films that we could mention that don't have a musical score to speak of. But there aren't very many critically acclaimed films with no musical underscore. Now, a common defense for people who say, I don't want to use an orchestral underscore, at least not very much, very reserved use of it, is they think that by not having an orchestral underscore, it makes it more realistic. The opposite also, they think, is true, that having a lot of orchestral underscore makes it too theatrical, too operatic, and not realistic. Years ago, there was a family friend that I remember. I was very young, but I still remember he was a big history buff. And he once said that he never reads fiction because he's afraid that he would confuse reality with these made-up stories. And at the time, I was like, well, that kind of makes sense. But now that I've gotten older and I've read the fiction and I've understood what it's all about, I realize how stupid that is. It's completely moronic because some of the most profound thoughts of reality only exist in that very focused world of made-up stories. These are not just made up that have nothing to do with us. They have everything to do with us. And we would do a lot better if we understood them more deeply. And I think Dracula is one of these stories that has had such a profound effect on our culture. Modern vampire lore, at least in the Western world, I think dates back to the early 1800s. And it reaches its peak with Bram Stoker's Dracula. It was published in 1897. This novel really cemented the modern vampire legend. And virtually all vampiric stories following that publication are definitely influenced by it. There's one earlier vampire film that I just want to briefly mention. It's F.W. Murnau's 1922 silent German expressionist film, Nosferatu, a symphony of horror. I bring it up for two reasons. Actually, three. The first reason is this, that he wanted to make a Dracula movie. And Bram Stoker had passed away already. And his not permit copyright clearance to do it. So Murnau still wanted to do the story. So he changed the character's name, tried to change just enough of the story to squeeze it under the law. But they sued, and they won. And part of their kind of ridiculous settlement was you have to destroy every copy of the film. Well, they didn't. We still have a few copies. They survived. And so it's, ever since then, it's been very influential throughout cinematic history. Here's the second reason that I bring that up. I didn't know that until I was looking at this research here. A young Aaron Copland, American composer, famous for his ballets, he was living in Paris in the 20s. He was a student of the infamous teacher Nadia Boulanger, and he decided to go to the cinema. What did he see? Nosferatu. And he decided right then and there, his first ballet was going to be based on vampiric lore. He was going to try to adapt that story somehow and make it a ballet. Well, the result ended up changes a little bit, but it ends up being a necromancer who brings people from the dead to dance for his amusement. Yeah, ballets are weird. I don't get the stories most of the time. But Grog ended up, that's the name of this character, Grog, G-R-O-H-G. It was never produced, and he actually later in his life removed it from his catalog entirely. It was considered a student work, never publicized, never performed. But I think the main reason he pulled it out of his catalog is that he reused a lot of that material in his dance symphony. I'd heard the dance symphony. I didn't know why it was called a dance symphony. I was like, I guess it's kind of lively. I don't really understand it. But the reason is the material was based off of his music that he had originally written for this ballet, but never made it. Here's the third reason I'll bring it up. Robert Eggers is remaking Nosferatu. It's coming out on Christmas this year, so I highly recommend you go see it. It's the most wonderful time of the year to see a scary movie, I think, so make sure you go see that. It should be fantastic. Now that brings us to 1931. Universal Pictures comes out with Dracula. This is based on a 1924 stage play of the novel, and it's the first sound film adaptation of Stoker's novel. Now there's almost no musical score whatsoever in this film. There was a weird belief that a lot of filmmakers in the early 30s had, and it was that any music that was recorded and be heard through the film needed to have a visual representation. In other words, it needed to be diegetic. Everybody in the film needs to hear it. Otherwise, they worried that the audience would be like, where's that music coming from? They would be completely confused by it. That seems ridiculous to us now, because we're so used to it everywhere. But they had this belief that all music needed a source on screen. So the only music that we really get, one is a music box that's playing. And the beginning of the scene with the music box is in the direct middle of the screen, and then they pull back out of it. So you know that that's where that music's coming from. The only other music has some orchestral excerpts. We hear a little bit of Die Meistersinger by Wagner, and we also hear a little bit of the very opening of the Unfinished Symphony by Schubert, so the low strings, that opening part, that very ominous opening. We get a little bit of that. Now, why? What justifies that being in this film? Well, as soon as Dracula arrives in London, what's his first thing he does? Well, he attacks a woman. But right after that, what does he do? He goes to see the London Symphony. You don't see the London Symphony, but you see a huge sign, and you see that he's at the theater, and that's justifying the presence of this music. Originally, in the script, it wasn't at the theater. It was in I think this whole scene was in like a living room somewhere. But they moved it so they could have that music playing at certain points. The only other music that we hear at all in the film is before the story even begins. The main titles, we get to hear a little bit of. So we get to hear a little bit of Swan Lake at the beginning, and that's been used over and over in various other horror films as well. All right, after we have these opening credits and our story begins, we are introduced to our first main character. He's an English solicitor named Renfield. Renfield is traveling through the Carpathian Mountains. He's trying to bring Count Dracula the legal paperwork so that the Count can purchase this old, dilapidated monastery near London called Carfax Abbey. On his journeys there, Renfield hears these, what he thinks are superstitions of the mountain people. They warn him about the dangers that are lurking in the mountains, and especially at Castle Dracula. The innkeeper describes Count Dracula as a vampire, that he and his wives can take on the form of wolves and bats, that they leave their coffins at night, and they feed on the blood of the living. But, like a good Englishman, Renfield ignores all of this and says, my responsibilities are to give this paperwork to Count Dracula. I'm on my way. So he dismisses these delusions entirely, thinking they're just naive people, and he compels the carriage driver, much against his will, to take him on to meet Dracula. The next scene is our introduction to Dracula. We begin with this establishing shot of Castle Dracula. Next, we come into the crypt, where we have various coffins scattered throughout this room. The camera starts pushing in, focusing on one of those coffins, and suddenly the lid starts to open, and this contorted hand reaches out at us. Yeah, so suddenly, with all of that happening, Dracula and his wives are emerging from their daytime slumber. Now, the reveal of Dracula here, he has the sinister glare. He's just looking into the camera while that camera pushes in on him. It's very intense, and it's quite fantastic. It's justifiably become legendary in cinematic history. So I'm going to watch this short scene. It's only about a minute and 15 seconds. It contains no music. There's no dialogue. It only has a few, what I would describe as kind of bizarre sound effects. So let's talk a little bit about the process that composers take in writing music for scenes such as that. Well, before any music whatsoever can be written, the director, the composer, various producers and editors all come together for a spotting session of the entire film. In spotting a film, we're collectively deciding where does there need to be music and what role does that music actually going to play. Now, it's important to realize that making a film in all aspects is a collaborative effort. Even though the film score is one of the last elements to be implemented into the film, we don't have complete autonomy over the end result of the music. But at the same time, while the director and the producer may have veto power over any kind of decisions that we make musically, the composer can actually have a tremendous influence over the film itself. Even the way the filmmakers view their own work can change because of the composer, because we're coming to the project with new eyes. The rest of the crew may have been working on this film for years at this point, and the composer's the newest kid on the block to come in, and with those fresh eyes can often say, you know, this is what's actually happening here, and they don't even realize that's what's been going on. It's important to realize that while there is not one correct way to score a film, there certainly is one incorrect way to score a film, and that's to go against the vision of the director. If it doesn't match what the storytelling needs and the vision of that, then it's going to be inappropriate. Now, on that note, back in 1998, Universal Pictures commissioned the composer Philip Glass to write a score for Dracula. When he released on DVD, he actually toured the country doing a lot of this. And if you're not familiar with Philip Glass, he's an American composer. We frequently associate him with minimalism, which he describes as music with repetitive structures. A more apt description I cannot imagine. So Glass, he wasn't new to film scoring. He's done many contemporary films, some of which you may have seen or heard of. He did The Truman Show, he did The Hours, The Illusionist. He's even received numerous Academy Award nominations for his film score. So this is not new to him. But regarding his score for Dracula, Glass says the following in an interview. The film is considered a classic. I felt the score needed to evoke the feeling of the world of the 19th century. For that reason, I decided a string quartet would be the most evocative and effective. I wanted to stay away from the obvious effects associated with horror films. Well, first of all, good for him for wanting to fit all of the correct mood, the correct period, and trying to fit into that. But I would like to add, however, that the concept of being novel in and of itself, finding new ways to musically communicate the ups and downs, the in and outs of a story, it's a noble goal. Maybe it's a beautiful artistic ambition, I don't know. But personally, I find it really annoying when useful and effective devices are just thrown out and replaced with things that are far less effective. So, in this particular circumstance, what is Glass talking about when he says, what are these obvious effects in horror films that he might be talking about? Well, I don't know what Philip Glass had in mind exactly. I'm going to offer you a few of the options that it might have been. Tone clusters, right? They're very disarming. They're kind of confusing. Another one I can't really do on the piano is pitch bending, right? I don't have control over that, but where you're bending a pitch, where you're not having clarity of a frequency. Things are moving around constantly. Atonality, it messes with us. It messes with us. There's no grounding in that either. So that's very common to use. What else? Jump scare, right? They're really effective. Okay, when you don't expect it, I usually do how to do that. Okay, he knows exactly how to chase that and make it work. What else? Oh, yeah. The organ. It's a Gothic staple. There's a reason that the Phantom of the Opera plays the organ. Right? We have that Gothic sound built into that. Another one I thought of that people frequently use. What is that? The Dies Irae, yes. It's ancient plain chant. It means the day of wrath. Okay? Composers use it all the time. So much so it's almost a little cliche, because you kind of expect it. It's not a surprise as much as it used to be. But before just throwing out all these cliches entirely, I think it's important to consider why they would be so frequently used in a horror film. Well, what do horror films do? They make us feel uneasy. They make us feel unstable. They untether us from reality. So, if we are obscuring pitch, harmony, frequency, we don't have any sense of resolution, atonality. We have these shocks. Okay, fair enough. These little shock things, they're kind of cheesy, all right? They're lame. I'll grant you that one. But I hope you realize that they're very useful in the right circumstances. But if that's all the score is just a chain of these things, that's when it starts to feel cliche. Or what I think is a better term, they feel generic. Meaning it doesn't feel like it's tightly connected to a particular film. It's like cheap library music that you could just throw on anything. And you just kind of go, oh, okay, that sounds kind of scary. Let's just throw that on there. It's not customized. It's not following the ups and downs and the ins and outs of the story. All right, so let's go back to our scene with Dracula and his wives awakening from their coffin. So what role do we want the music to play here? It's sparse, isn't it? It's actually kind of effective. All the silence is like it's nothing. I think the sound design could have been way better. There could have been a lot more creepy sounds. But they don't have that, okay? There's a couple of things that are kind of cool about the sounds. Mostly it's kind of weird, okay? I think we can make a much better mysterious atmosphere using music. Okay, I think it's going to do way better than those sound effects ever could. I also think we need a sense of anticipation, especially for that ultimate reveal of Dracula, because it's spectacular. So we want to anticipate that. Right now, when I watch that, even today, I've been working on this for a while, there's some weird images that they throw in there. Did you see the possum and the bee coming out of this tiny little coffin thing? It's weird. And I watched that and I'm like, what are we doing? Well, I know what we're doing. We're delaying the presentation of Dracula. That's what we're doing. But what I think the music can do more than anything else is that it can glue all these disparate things together so that it feels like it's all connected. A single thread is going to sew that thing all the way together and lead us to the moment that we want to experience the reveal of Dracula. So once we've determined what that role of the music is going to be, next comes a really tedious process, and that is determining the timings of the scene. Now, what that means is we have to consider where everything is timing-wise so that we can figure out the tempo that's going to best fit our scene. Now, there's two ways that we can really visualize tempo in a film like this. One is the scene is going to have music that's very rhythmic. It's going to have a lot of precise synchronizations, a lot of sharp turns that are going to need to hit, a lot of action, a lot of cuts. If that's the case, we're going to need an exact tempo marking. And I mean a tempo marking down to the nearest hundredth of a beats per minute. I mean very precise so that we can lock in exactly. And if you're doing this for an orchestra, every member of the orchestra has an earpiece in their ear and there's a click. So they know exactly where they're supposed to be, so that it has every chance of being together. The other possibility is where there are some synchronization points, but there doesn't need to be a very strict tempo in order to hit them. Okay? We don't need that rigidity. This is something called free timing in the conducting of film scores. I prefer this method whenever possible because it allows the music to breathe more expressively, more musically. It allows things to stretch so that it can arrive at the proper time. Now, this scene that we have already watched is going to need just a few scene points. We are certainly not going to need a strict metronome. We're not going to have a drum set in there walking us down. Okay, we don't need that. That can stay in the closet for this. I am, however, going to need a pretty fairly accurate tempo in order to compose by. Because if I don't know basically my pace and where everything's going to line up, I'm going to have a lot more difficulty. So this process starts by finding the detailed timing notes of this scene. Now, this is the tedious process. In a Hollywood setting, this would be the music editor's job, not the composer's job. But I just made this project up. So I don't have a music editor. Although now I'm looking at my TAs going, but nevertheless, what we're going to have to know is we need to know the exact timing of every cut. We need to know what that cut is. We need to know what every action is. Any dialogue when it starts, any dialogue when it stops. We need to know any sound effects, where they are. I need a visual layout of all the times here. All right, so we're going to watch this scene again, but at the bottom, you're going to see kind of a timer. It's going to go like 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And it's when it's the middle of the white bar there, that's when it's active. Okay? But it's also going to show you where the cuts and things are that happen. So you can see how accurate we need to have this. So he becomes the stagecoach driver that's going to pick Redfield up and bring him to his castle. So that's what's going on at the end of that. But do you see how the timing, now luckily, there's not a whole lot going on in that minute and 15 seconds, so it didn't take very long to calculate where all that was. It took longer to make that video than it did to calculate where all that was. But now I need to know what tempo I need to compose to. Now, the distance between that establishing shot of Castle Dracula and when we hit that crypt, that is about, well, it's exactly 8.633 seconds. Now, if I wanted something very, very precise, I would need that detail at the level. But I'm doing free time, so I can be much more raw about it. 8.5 seconds, I can even say 9 seconds, close enough, okay, 9 seconds. I can be loose about that. Now, the crypt, when we get to the crypt and we go to the opening of that coffin, that's another really important moment that I want to hit. That takes 15.5 seconds roughly. We can go with 16. I'm fine with that, okay? It's going to be rather slow tempo, so what's a half a beat? Okay, I can stretch that easily, that's not a problem. Then, the climax of the whole thing is the reveal of Dracula. From the moment we see Dracula and it starts closing in on him, that is almost exactly 9 seconds. Okay, so notice that opening thing was about 9 seconds, the reveal of Dracula is 9 seconds. Now, let's say we're not going to have a really fast tempo, let's go with 60 beats per minute, just as a ballpark guess. That means 1 beat per second. So that 9 seconds is how many beats? 9. That means you have 3 measures of 3/4 time. See how that works? Now, when I was kind of messing around at 60, it felt just a little slow to me. And I didn't like it being 3. So I said, okay, let me bump it up to 66. Because if I go to 66, I now have 10 beats within that 9 measures. Or the 9 seconds, excuse me. I have an extra beat in those 9 seconds. That means 5 measures of 2/4 time. And that felt a little bit better. Okay? So I can stretch as I need to be able to hit those moments. But now I at least have a tempo in mind. 66 beats per minute. So what we're going to watch now is the same scene again, but now at the bottom you're going to see a scrolling score, and it's going to show you where those hit points are in the measure based on 66. It's close to 66. It's actually 66 point something, but it's close enough. And it's in the middle of the screen, that's where it is. How long this is. So once I had that, I was like, yeah, that lines up pretty close to what I need to hit. I printed off something for me to just sketch around on. Yeah, so I have this layout now where I said, okay, I've got 5 measures before I need to hit that crypt. Okay, and as soon as I get that, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 measures until that coffin opens and the hand starts to emerge. Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 measures until the bride's coffin begins to open. And so now I have a template that I can start to follow. Because I don't want the music to just hit everything, because if it hits everything, it's going to be kind of cartoony. And part of the issue that I had with the scene without music to begin with is that it feels scattered. There's too many weird things happening. And I need to play through a lot of it. There's only certain moments that I want to hit. So things are tied together that as soon as something really important happens, shift. I know where I need to shift. And so I'm not hitting everything. I'm just hitting the things that I've decided were the most important things to hit. Now, most of the sound effects that we hear there are kind of weird, as I've mentioned. I'm not really worried about covering them up, because I don't think they're very good. There's one, however, that I do like. You know Coffee Creek's pretty good, yeah, that's right. The wolf howl at the end. That's the best part of it, okay? That wolf howl. I do not want to hide that, okay? So I'm going to steer clear of that frequency. Everywhere else, I'm not really worried about hiding anything. But right there, I want to stay clear of that howl. I want to be out of that range as best I can. All right. Let me walk you through the cue that I have come up for with this. A lot of what I've based this, and I've got these little clusters. So one thing I'll go ahead and tell you, since we were just talking about that wolf howl, the last note is a D. I based that at D minor. Why? That wolf hangs out on a D for a while before he starts descending, and it sounds really good against it. So I was like, okay, that won't clash with it. I like that. So D minor it is. Hans Zimmer loves D minor. He thinks that's the best key. I think he writes everything in D minor, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so I've got this cluster right here. Mysterious sounding, I think so. Now, what is that cluster? It's not just random notes, because that's not the way I roll. Here's a D minor chord. In this hand, I'm playing a C sharp minor chord against it. So there's 6 different notes happening at the same time. So it's hexatonic. You got 6 notes all going at the same time. Now, I'm going to want some contrast, because the real place that I want to hit is that hand emerging. I want that to be dramatic, so that's where I want something low to happen. So I'm going to stay higher up to that point. So I'm going to start out with that chord in the strings. Just this pale, mysterious kind of color. And I'm having these little things while the castle's glistening. It's dull, I don't know. All right. And then we hit the crypt. Now, the crypt's empty for all we know. We've seen this scene about 5 times now. You know what's going to happen, but you have to imagine, you have to put yourself in the position of, this is the first time I've ever seen it. What do I know so far? I know nothing so far. I don't know that a hand's getting ready to come out there. So I have a drum, open fifths. Is this a happy, a sad occasion? No opinion. This is just open, vast space, perfect fifths. Then I have this little melody that leads us forward towards that. This melody is based out of this collection, that collection right there. And then when the coffin opens, we switch chords. This becomes a D minor major 7 chord. Right? It's got this mysterious quality to it. And so that will go on for a little while. And I've mentioned already that the reveal of Dracula is delayed. Right? It's delayed. First, we have his wives are rising out of their coffins. And the whole reason for that is it's kind of we explore, oh, they're not as creepy as I thought. They're kind of creepy looking, but they're not really as creepy as we expected something to happen. And then, boom, we see Dracula. And oh, that's a shock. And I think that's meant to happen. Because everybody else we see rising up. Dracula, he's already up, and he's in the zone. He's ready to attack. Okay, so we've got to mirror that somehow. So I thought maybe while the wives are coming up, it's a little sweeter a sound, something higher, something more lyrical, so that when Dracula himself appears, we can really get some contrast out of that. So we're going to get the contrast when Dracula comes in, and you know how that camera moves into him. It intensifies his gaze. I need to do the same thing musically. I need to do the exact same thing musically. I need to grow as that's happening. And then as soon as we cut away from him, I'm going to bring that tune back, just a fragment of it. And then we howl in the same note, right? Like 3 octaves higher. Okay, so that's what we're looking for here. That's what we're looking for here. So we've got all this mysterious and all this growth that we're looking for. Now, how in the world would you record this with an orchestra? Okay, how do you make sure that everything lines up? Well, filmmakers have devised a system of, they're called punches and streamers. A punch is just a bright flash. You actually take a hole punch in the frame and go, and so the light of the projector just shines right through it. Now they do it differently because there's no film to actually do that. But back then, it would have done it that way. Then there are streamers. The streamer is a bar, a white bar that's going to go right across the screen. And what that enables us to do is to anticipate the sync point. And the sync point is at when it hits the far right side of the screen. Does that make sense? So you see this, you go, oh, I'm almost there, boom, and you see exactly when that pacing is going to go. And you can change it, it can be a second, it can be 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 2.5 seconds, whatever you want it to be. Mine are 2 seconds, but it's fine, okay? I'm not too picky about this. So I'm going to play it for you one more time without any recorded music. I'm going to try to play it again. I don't know if I can do that or not. See if I can. I haven't tried it in here because the screen's back there, so I don't know if I can play it and align with all of it. But we'll give it a go. I'm going to have to be fast because it doesn't give me a lot of time to get over there. Hold on. So it's going to go flash, 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 boom. So there's 4 beats of prep for me to get there. How fast can it be? Not that fast. Come on. Come on. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that I have a kind of sketch of what I wanted to do, I can orchestrate. And so we're going to hear a virtual orchestra performance. So it's very time consuming to make it sound anything like a real thing. So it's always better to have a real bunch of people to play. I would rather just have you all bring your instruments or your voice or whatever and just perform it. It would sound way better than any kind of digital rendering that I can create. But it's as good as I can do. So we'll go with that. So let me tell you a little bit more about what's going on orchestrationally here. Again, string, usually strings, just to give it a little tightness to it. Glockenspiel and harp. So very down line. String, open fifth. Now this melody right here. Took a little while to decide what do I want to do for that. If you remember, a horror film is meant to make you feel uneasy. So I decided I don't want people to know immediately what instrument this is. So what did I use? It's in that kind of alto-y range. I used the English horn and an alto flute in unison. The combination of those two hopefully is going to make you go, what is that? I don't quite know what that is. Now most people don't care enough to think about that kind of thing, but this is what artists do, I suppose. So at least I do it anyway. So I'm thinking I want to make it a little bit more difficult for people to tell exactly what that's supposed to be. Then when we get to that chord right there, the harp is making all these undulations using this very weird scale. I won't go into the details of what that is. But then we have later the violin is doing that lyrical. Dracula part sounds like nonsense at the piano, and I didn't play hardly any of the right notes, and I just did it because I was trying to look up there and I didn't know what notes I was supposed to be playing. But I changed it to an octatonic collection, which is whole steps and half steps. So it's just a little bit different. But I got muted low brass playing this octatonic chord. harmony sound. It's like it doesn't sound like normal brass, but very effective. It's like a harmony in there. So we get this Viking quality to it. The strings that we're doing this wonderful have now jumped up all these dissonances. But then the best part of this is I have an SATB chorus that come in right there. And so they're doing these clusters, these 4-part clusters that are rising, alternating, octave collections going up like that. Now, why did I use a choir there? One, it just occurred to me that would probably sound kind of cool, but also it's like the most humanizing element that we have, because we relate to the human voice before we relate to anything else. And it's Dracula. He kind of looks human, but those little atonally sounding clusters make you go, but something's not right about that. So it's human, but is it really? Does it really sound like a choir? It does, but it doesn't sound like a normal choir. So we have all this tension. It releases, and then I bring back the English horn and the alto flute for symmetry at the end. And then the double bass is cello. And a bit out. All right, so let's watch it one more time. This time we'll have the full mix of the score. So it gives it more of a structure to it, and that's what I was wanting more than anything. It doesn't. Now, when I watch it without any music, it feels really, really awkward. And so if I watch them back and forth, I go, okay, even if I don't like everything that I did, I like it better with music, right? It feels more natural to that story. All right. There's one other scene that I want us to kind of talk about. And it occurs way later in the movie. Well, the movie's only an hour and 15 minutes, so it's not that much further, but it's later in the story. So this is where Dracula is confronting his main adversary, who's Professor Von Helsing. So Von Helsing comes from, Dutch, I think is what he's supposed to be. But he comes in because there's all these reports of weird happenings. And he's an expert not in just modern medicine of that time, but also folk medicine. And so he has a much larger depth of knowledge and experience, and so they bring him in because they are flabbergasted with what they need to do. Dracula has already killed multiple people, but one of the main female characters he's already killed, and he's on his way now to finish the job with the second main female character. And so here we have Van Helsing, who knows that Dracula is a vampire and must be stopped. So the scene is about 2.5 minutes long, so let's watch the original 1931 version of Van Helsing versus Dracula here.
Van Helsing. Now that you have learned what you have learned, it would be well for you to return to your own country.
I prefer to remain and protect those whom you would destroy.
You are too late. My blood now flows through her veins. She will live through the centuries to come, as I have lived.
Should you escape us, Dracula, we know how to save Miss Mina's soul, if not her life.
If she dies, by day, but I shall see that she dies by night.
And I will have Carfax Abbey torn down stone by stone, excavated a mile around. I will find your earth box and drive that stake through your heart.
Come here. Come here. Your will is strong and Helsing. More Wolfbane.
More effective than Wolfbane, Count. Indeed.
It's a little silly, but the acting is actually pretty good. And I think the absence of music really hurts it, because they're just talking like, what's happening right now? I don't feel the energy change, even though the acting is really quite good. Now, I think we're going to take a different approach on this one. What I thought I would do is show you a scene from a Dracula film from 1979. It's based off of the same play. They made a lot of changes, but it's basically the same scene. And we're going to watch it without music. So I've painstakingly removed the music from it so that we can listen to it just with the dialogue and the sound effects. And then we'll put the music back in after we talk a little bit about what role that music's going to play. So this is from 1979 without music.
Oh, the devil.
Not as bad as that.
I did not hear you come in, Count.
I am often told I have a light footstep.
I was looking in the mirror. It reflects the whole room, and yet I cannot see.
Forgive me, Doctor. I dislike mirrors. They are the playthings of man's vanity.
You are a most unusual creature, Count Dracula.
Yes. How is the fair patient?
Her diagnosis presents difficulties.
I feared it might, my friend.
Would you care to see what I have prescribed for her?
Anything that you prescribe for Miss Lucy has the greatest interest for me.
My prescription is a most unusual one.
You are a wise man, Professor. For one who has not lived even a single lifetime.
You flatter me,
But
Count.
not wise enough to return to Holland at once, now that you have learned what you have learned.
I prefer to remain.
In the past 500 years, Professor, those who have crossed my path have all died, and some not pleasantly. Come here! Your will is strong. Then I must come to you. Sacrilege! Sacrilege!
Fantastic transformation into a wolf. I wonder how they did that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on there and what the composer can add to that. Maybe you've never seen a scene quite like that, where there's intended to be music and there's nothing to help guide you through there. There's a lot of good musicians who go to a movie and they don't remember the music at all, and that's fine. You're not really intended to be really focused on the music all the time. Most of the time, it's preferred you never know that there's even music there. It's just in the background, guiding you along the path. So what are some of the things that our composer is going to try to hit? By the way, the composer is one John Williams, so he's the best in the business, so he's worth studying. There's a new documentary of him coming out on Disney Plus, I think November 1st, music by John Williams. I don't have Disney Plus, but I'm going to get it so I can watch that. So that's good. I did see the trailer for it, and Steven Spielberg, who of course worked a lot with John Williams, says in that trailer, if you want to know the magic of John Williams, watch a scene without music, which is what we just did, and then watch it with music, which is what we're getting ready to do. So you can actually hear and feel the difference emotionally between those scenes. But let me just highlight some of the main things that he's going to use as pivot points, sync points that he's trying to hit and trying to guide our story through. The music starts when Dracula does the door handles. That's when we're going to get the music to start. Then when he steps into the room, he's going to hit that. Van Helsing turns abruptly because, of course, you see the mirror that was on this side of the screen, and there was no reflection of Dracula over there because vampires supposedly don't have reflections. So he is looking at the mirror. He doesn't see anybody coming in, and so he turns abruptly when he hears his voice. John Williams is going to catch that. When Dracula smashes that mirror, he's going to provide a little bit of extra oomph to it. You may have heard the sound effect goes crash, and then it just stops. He's going to take that and stretch it just a little bit so it's not quite so abrupt. Then this is a very masterful thing. There's an immediate change where it says, "You are a most unusual creature, Count Dracula." And it was yes. And he says, "How's our fair patient?" And then they change topics. It takes it off of him and towards this woman that he's trying to kill, and they're turning into a vampire. But he enables the music to change on a dime to redirect the flow of the story right there. It's really well done. Of course, that garlic attack, when he pulls up the garlic, is a big surprise. You're going to get something right there. One of my favorite parts is when Dracula responds to that, he comes back and says, "You're a wise man, even for one who hasn't lived a single lifetime." He turns his head very sinisterly. He's going to catch that turn to make it very intense when that happens. And he keeps getting more intense, and he's going to follow that musically as he gets more aggressive. When he says, "Come here," you're going to hear that. He's going to steer clear of that. He's going to change the music there. We'll definitely hear a change when that spell overcomes Van Helsing. You're going to hear this high violin thing. It's like, oh, all of a sudden, something up here has just changed very dramatically. When Dracula says, well, I guess that's not going to work, so he lowers his hand. You're going to follow the music there. When Van Helsing takes the crucifix out, you're going to hear the music change. And then when he holds it up, that is going to be a huge change. That's when the most action is happening here. And then when Dracula stops his motion, you're going to catch that. And then you hear him say, sacrilege, sacrilege. And he says it twice. The first time, pretty subdued. The second time, he wants to make sure you hear that. He's shouting it, basically. So he's going to steer clear of that to make sure that you can hear that. But that's the last word that we have. The last thing is the dramatic change to a wolf through the window. And so he's going to intensify the music and have all sorts of crazy musical sound effects, including all these string harmonic glissandos and stuff that are going. And then when we hit the new scene, the music fades out. So there's a lot happening in this short 3-minute clip. But here we go with music.
Oh, the devil.
Not as bad as that.
I did not hear you come in, Count.
I am often told I have a light footstep.
I was looking in the mirror. It reflects the whole room, and yet I cannot see.
Forgive me, Doctor. I dislike mirrors. They are the playthings of man's vanity.
You are a most unusual creature, Count Dracula.
Yes. How is the fair patient?
Her diagnosis presents difficulties.
I feared it might, my friend.
Would you care to see what I have prescribed for her?
Anything that you prescribe for Miss Lucy has the greatest interest for me.
My prescription is a most unusual one.
You are a wise man, Professor. For one who has not lived even a single lifetime.
You flatter me,
But not
Count.
wise enough to return to Holland at once, now that you have learned what you have learned.
I prefer to remain.
In the past 500 years, Professor, those who have crossed my path have all died, and some not pleasantly. Come here! Your will is strong. Then I must come to you. Sacrilege! Sacrilege!
Very different scene with music. Very different scene with music. There's a lot of subtle things in it. There's some things that aren't very subtle in there. It's very 70s either way. One thing that exists now, is very common in modern film making and film composing, is the use of something called a temp score. A temp score. What this is before a composer comes on board, the editors, the director, producers will experiment by trying out different existing pieces of music. For any recording that they can find that they think might have the sound they're looking for in their scene, they'll slap it on there and see if it seems right. Often editors use this because the rhythm of the music helps them to decide how much longer should that scene go before that cuts to the next thing. And so that information really helps them. It's usually the bane of a composer's existence because the filmmakers listen to it and watch it so many times they get obsessed with the music that they always heard connected to that film. And so when the composer wants to do their own thing, they're like, no, I don't like that. No, make it more like the 10 track. Make it more like the 10 track. Growing up, there were some scores that I heard that I was like, man, that sounds too much like the planets. Too much. It's generic planets. Why not even just use the planets? It's so close. And then I found out what the actual story was, where one composer was fired because it wouldn't get close enough. So Bill Conti was hired and had 10 days to write 3 hours of music for this huge film. And he wrote some music and they were like, no, make it closer to the 10th score. And he ended up saying, all right, I'm going to do it, but you've got to put Holst's name in the credits, right? Not all these composers are just stealing things all the time. When you say, man, that really sounds like this piece. Sometimes it's not their fault. It's a collaborative process. Sometimes you got to do what the boss says, okay? And you may try to hide it as best you can, but sometimes you can't. All right, so if that's a common practice, what I thought we could try to do, or I would try to do, is I took this John Williams score for that scene, and I put it in the 1931 scene. It's the same scene, basically. So can I edit it down so it seems kind of legit? I did this yesterday, so it seemed like a good idea. So we're going to listen to it. I think I listened to it once after I did it. So we'll see. I've had to move things all over the place. Some of it may work, some of it may not. I think I purposely said I don't want John Williams' main theme, which you may have heard. That little thing came in there a couple of times. So that's the main theme of it. I was like, I'm going to not use that part of it. I probably did at some point. I can't remember at this point. So let's watch this and see what it sounds like with John Williams' score, kind of piecemealed together a little bit.
Van Helsing. Now that you have learned what you have learned, it would be well for you to return to your own country.
I prefer to remain and protect those whom you would destroy.
You are too late. My blood now flows through her veins. She will live through the centuries to come, as I have lived.
Should you escape us, Dracula, we know how to save Miss Mina's soul, if not her life.
If she dies by day, but I shall see that she dies by night.
And I will have Carfax Abbey torn down stone by stone, excavated a mile around. I will find your earth box and drive that stake through your heart.
Come here. Come here. Your will is strong, Van Helsing.
More Wolfbane, more effective than Wolfbane, Count. Indeed.
start is doing that. Just any piece of music that you're like, no, I wonder what that would sound like on that scene. Just throw it on there. See what it's like. If you ever want to know what Batman sounds like with bagpipes, go for it. Go for it. Okay? You never know what you might come up with. But it's a really good way to learn how to structure things and see, oh, if the change occurs here, he loses his eyebrow a little bit. If I make that change there, it completely transforms the pacing of it. It's amazing what you can kind of explore by doing that. And once you get kind of good at it, you can go pretty fast. Now, I only took that one track, and it happened to be that scene was a little bit longer in the 70s version than in the 30s version. So I had a little bit of extra material. But I could take any piece of music from anywhere and try it out. And they don't have to be all the same. Usually what the result is it's kind of piecemealed together, and then the composer is given the temp track if they want it, and they can kind of take some clues from it, like, oh, I think they really want to hit this point, so I need to make sure I do that. There's a lot of filmmakers that aren't real comfortable talking about the technical aspects of music. They don't have the terminology for it, they don't have the experience of it. And so when they actually have something to listen to, they feel a lot more confident about what role it's going to play. So it's really useful, kind of difficult to work with at times. All right, so let's talk about what that temp score doesn't do that I think I would like to be able to do in my own score of this scene. One of the things that I think is missing, I guess, is that this is supposed to be adversarial between those two characters. And I think dramatically what happens is Van Helsing and Dracula are pretty much on an even stubbornness scale when they start. They're both like standing firm against each other, but supernaturally Dracula starts to take the upper hand. But by the end, the tables are turned, and Van Helsing takes over. So we have this dramatic shift of who's kind of in control of the scene, who's winning the day. So I need more contrast. I think the director, Browning, did an incredible job. I'll go ahead and mention this, that in 31, when they made Dracula in English, they also, at the exact same time, made Dracula in Spanish. One of the very rare times they made two films at the same time in two different languages, using the same sets, different actors, obviously, and they have a different director and all this, but in the day, they would film the English version, at night, they would do the Spanish version. The Spanish version is almost 30 minutes longer than the English version. They are actually really, really different. I bought the screenplay, somebody published it anyway, so I bought it thinking it would be helpful finding timings and stuff. It would be great for the Spanish version because it follows it almost verbatim. They made almost no changes. But the English version is almost nothing like it. Things are completely out of order. Lots of things are missing. So a lot of changes are made in there. But one of the best changes is this staging by the director. He keeps them in single frames apart from each other. Each shot is different. And as the tension rises, he moves Dracula in to meet him. And it's really effective because as the tension heightens, they start coming closer together. And then they're kind of spread back apart as the drama surges some more. But it's in the Spanish version, it's weaker because they're together the whole time. It's like they're just sitting there talking to each other. And it loses that dramatic flair. My favorite image is this, I guess it's the second one of Dracula, because it's kind of from underneath, and he just looks like very powerful and in charge of things. It's a really good picture of it. So I want more contrast between those two characters, and I want to highlight that. So what am I doing here? Do you remember the little cluster that I used in the other one? It was two minor chords that half step apart together. I'm doing something similar here, but I decided to do two major triads, a minor second apart. So here's a G flat major triad. Here's an F major triad. Put those together. I get that. You may go, that sounds just as weird as that other chord. Almost. Okay, almost. But it's a little bit different. But what's cool about an F major triad and a G flat major triad together is it also has the ingredients of two minor chords that go really well together. So I can switch back and forth between those two major chord relationships and two minor chord relationships. What I can pull out of it is a B flat minor chord and F sharp minor chord. So that's a chromatic medium, those of you who are interested in such things. starts out, my version, with the low strings. That's the reveal of Dracula coming in through the window. That's a G-flat major triad against the low C. So you have that tension, that open space. The horn solo can't decide what scale I'm supposed to be in. And then we go to Van Helsing, trying to be strong, and so we get muted trumpets going. Right on that articulation, what does he say? I prefer to remain, or something like that. And do you remember the tune that I had in the English horn and the alto flute? I bring that back here. Everybody here recognize that little tune? And then we cut to that really nice scene of Dracula that I was talking about, the shot kind of from underneath where he looks very big and powerful. Stop horns, boom, right on that, very regal kind of sound, but stops, so it has this tinny quality. And against that, as he's going to start moving, we have that little pizzicato cellos and basses. And now, as soon as he starts moving to confront Van Helsing, I do flute, clarinet, oboe, bassoon, bass clarinet. And so we end up on B flat minor. Okay? At that point, Van Helsing is talking about Mina and what he's going to do for her. So I feel a little sympathy at that point. So we get these ethereal strings. But at the same time, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we're getting these low piano clusters. Non-strict noise down here. And when he says, I will find your earth box, and I'll put that stake through your heart, he's building up, and it seems sinister, and the horn plays that motive. And then we get this chord, and then Dracula says, come here, and he starts trying to pull him in. And so here, I don't know if I like this or not, this is what I've done, so this is what I'm going to show you. I've got this tritone, E and B, in the piano and in double basses, pulsing. In the meantime, the timpani is doing this. So you're glissando-ing in the timpani, do all of that. I also have two muted trombones playing pedal tones. What are they playing? Dies irae. I did it out of spite. And it's so low and muted, nobody's going to hear it down there. But then, just to sell it even further, in response to those two trombones just making all that racket down there, it's very quiet. But I have two bass clarinets, a major second apart, doing the Dies irae, but so it's very muddy sounding. It's just very bleh. We don't have a lot of clarity in anything that's going on right there. Then, when Van Helsing starts to waver and he starts to be put under the spell, you remember those two major triads, G flat major and F major? Strings play those, but they don't just hold it. They start slowly wavering back and forth, like a large vibrato almost. And so they start wavering, and they start accelerating that. And so you start getting this motion of rapid fluctuation. I also have the harp doing it stiffando, which is this little tremolo business that they do, so it's very fluid feeling. And then when he pulls back away from it, you go back to the trombone, doing that in the bass clarinets and all that. And then when Dracula says, your will is strong, Van Helsing, change, because a new tactic is going to be underway. And I give the violins and cellos do a tremolo A. We feel energy getting ready to happen. And so as soon as Dracula starts to move in, we hear this. so the tension, we feel it percolating there. So the violas. As soon as he starts surging into attack, the violins and violas have this build up, and it stops and he holds up the crucifix, and while it's paused, the flutes and oboes and clarinets have this weird cluster, I don't remember what it is, something like that, and then the muted trumpets and horns have this right? So it has this huge build up, and it just kind of fakes you out. So that's what's going to happen, I think, something like that. All right, so here we go. Here it is with the full mix.
Van Helsing. Now that you have learned what you have learned, it would be well for you to return to your own country.
I prefer to remain and protect those whom you would destroy.
You are too late. My blood now flows through her veins. She will live through the centuries to come, as I have lived.
Should you escape us, Dracula, we know how to save Miss Mina's soul, if not her life.
If she dies by day, but I shall see that she dies by night.
And I will have Carfax Abbey torn down stone by stone, excavated a mile around. I will find your earth box and drive that stake through your heart.
Come here. Come here. Your will is strong, Van Helsing. More Wolfbane.
More effective than Wolfbane, Count. Indeed.
Looking at the time, I've gone longer than I meant to, so I'm going to stop right there. I want to thank you for coming. I hope it has been interesting to you. I hope it's percolated some interest in some film music. Maybe you are interested in the process of composing for film. The department has actually talked a little bit about having a program of more commercial kind of composition and things like that. I don't know how many years down the road that is, but if you're interested in that kind of thing, talk to the people who have power. Okay, that's not me. I'm just a lowly person who likes it. Okay, but I'm trying to get people interested in inspiring the people who have the money to make this happen, to make it happen. So if you are interested in that, please do it. So I don't know why each of you came, but I appreciate you coming. If this wasn't exactly what you thought it was going to be, and you've been tricked in some way, luckily there are treats right out there. So please take advantage of that. I'll be floating around through here, so if you've got questions for me, or if you just want to talk about stuff. One question I'm sure you'll ask is, where did I get this awesome shirt? That's my wife's doing as well. I don't know where she got it, but it's cool. But if you got any questions, or if you want to talk about anything else, I don't want to hold anybody too long. I'm giving an exam at 8 a.m. in the morning. I know at least one person in here's got to take it, so I don't want to keep people too late. So thank you very much for joining me tonight.